Welcome to this investigative explainer. Today, we're diving into the Bailey sewer crisis. Now, at first glance, this might just sound like a localized utility hiccup, right? But stick with me, because what we're actually looking at is a full-blown, looming financial crisis for an entire township. Right out of the gate, we're talking about a staggering $1.5 million at stake for Casnovia Township. That right there is the approximate book value of the Bailey sewer system. And it's really crucial to understand this is not just a localized Bailey issue. It's a township-wide issue. What we're seeing here is literally a textbook case study in how bureaucratic delays, ignored data, and operational negligence can just completely snowball. We aren't talking about fixing a minor pipe. This is one of the township's absolute largest public assets. And, well, the financial picture gets even more intense. The system currently carries roughly $400,000 in outstanding debt. So the central question for every single taxpayer in Casnovia Township is really this. Is the township going to step up, repair, and properly operate the system they already own? Or are they going to let the situation deteriorate until the state of Michigan swoops in and forces taxpayers to foot the bill for a multi-million-dollar solution? Because remember, that groundwater discharge permit, it's issued to the township itself, meaning everyone's wallet is exposed here. So how did we get here? Let's walk through the timeline, because a crisis like this absolutely doesn't happen overnight. The system originally went into service around 2013. By 2018, the State Environmental Agency, EGLE, issued a violation notice for saturated drain fields and excessive flows. Fast forward 3 years. It's 2021. There's been no meaningful resolution, and EGLE issues another notice. This time, they're explicitly suggesting the township build out its already permitted reserve drain fields. Then we hit 2023. The old violations are still unresolved, and EGLE tacks on a new one for lacking a licensed operator. So we're looking at 5 years of inaction, turning what was a totally manageable problem into a severe regulatory threat. This brings us to late 2023, where the township faced a really critical fork in the road. A local engineering firm came in and offered a proposal focused entirely on just fixing the existing system. Pretty straightforward, right? But that wasn't pursued. Instead, the township had already commissioned a $28,000 preliminary engineering report, or PER. Now, a PER is typically used for USDA grant applications when you want to build massive infrastructure projects. The lure of future grant money might have made this report seem super attractive at the time. But as you'll see, sometimes the path that looks the cheapest up front can lead to some truly staggering costs down the line. And wow, here are those staggering costs. When that PER was delivered in early 2024, it completely bypassed simple fixes. Instead, it evaluated massive, multi-million-dollar construction alternatives. We're talking $4.2 million just to move the drain field, $6.4 million to pump the wastewater to Grant, or an eye-watering $7.7 million to construct a brand new lagoon system. The absolutely crucial thing to keep in mind here is that the Bailey system serves only about 66 residential units. For a system that extraordinarily small, multi-million-dollar price tags are just completely economically unrealistic without some kind of unprecedented grant assistance. Now, the PER pushed really heavily toward these regional solutions, but let's take a hard look at reality for a second. Connecting to the nearby village of Casnovia? Practically impossible. They simply do not have the treatment capacity without undertaking a massive expansion of their own lagoon system. And what about pumping it all the way north to Grant? Well, Grant has already identified some serious capacity, financial, and political hurdles. For starters, they'd require a massive $300,000 connection fee, plus roughly $93,000 a year just for treatment and operations. So while these options might look neat and tidy on a piece of paper, in reality, they're wildly unfeasible. To make matters worse, the engineering report basically treated the continued use of the existing permitted drain field as uncertain. They actually claimed a brand new $150,000 soil and groundwater investigation was required before anyone could move forward. But here's the real investigative twist. Much of the information they claimed to need was literally already sitting on EGLE's publicly accessible website, right there in the original 2012 permit. That 2012 data clearly documented native sand beneath the disposal area and groundwater 20 feet below grade. So you really have to ask, why demand a wildly expensive new study when the original, state-approved data already proved the site was viable? Well, it turns out the site didn't fail because of bad soil at all. In 2025, an independent investigation by environmental consultants dug into the actual operating history. And what they found completely flipped the script. The real culprits? We're talking malfunctioning valves causing poor flow distribution, a residential well that was literally running continuously right into the system, severe soil compaction from an unreported vandalism incident, and, get this, unauthorized septage dumping that caused massive flow spikes during dry weather. These are classic management, operation, and enforcement failures. It was never a failed site. And the proof is right there in the data. Once the township actually started addressing these operational issues, repairing the valves, fixing that continuously running well, and throwing up some highly visible security cameras to stop the unauthorized dumping, the system responded almost immediately. The average daily flow dropped by hundreds of gallons, stabilizing at roughly 6,000 gallons per day. To put that into perspective, the legal permit limit for the system is 10,000 gallons per day. So simply by operating the thing correctly, they got the flow comfortably back under the legal ceiling. The visual proof of this turnaround is honestly stunning. Take a look at this side-by-side aerial comparison of the exact same drainfield area. On the left, we have May 2025. On the right, June 2026, so roughly 1 year later. Just look at the dramatic, visible improvement there. Even during periods of unusually heavy rainfall in the spring of 2026, there was little to no wastewater visible at the surface. This absolutely confirms what we were just talking about. This system was never doomed by bad soil, it just desperately needed proper operation and management. Proper operation literally changed the outcome. So, with all that in mind, what's the actual affordable path forward here? Honestly, it's something Eagle suggested all the way back in 2021, building out the reserve drain fields. These are areas right on the existing site that are already covered by the existing permit. Building them out would essentially double the available disposal area, which allows the township to rotate the fields so they can properly rest and dry out. And the best part? This preserves the township's $1.5 million asset and would only cost somewhere in the hundreds of thousands, not millions. It's just a practical, affordable, totally common sense solution. But there is a ticking clock here, and the stakes could not be higher. In their 2023 letter, EGLE issued a stark warning. They wrote, quote, "Due to the length and severity of the noncompliance and the potential risk to public health, the matter is being evaluated for escalated enforcement." Let that sink in. If Casnovia Township acts responsibly now and makes progress on those reserve fields, they keep control over the solution. And more importantly, they control the cost. But if they drag their feet, escalated enforcement changes the whole game. You see, under escalated enforcement, the state essentially strips the township of all its negotiating leverage. The Michigan Attorney General could legally step in and simply mandate a specific multi-million-dollar corrective project. At that point, it doesn't matter if taxpayers can afford it. The only question becomes how they're going to pay for what they are forced to build. And here's a truly shocking detail for you. The township's insurance carrier has indicated there might not even be coverage for the legal expenses related to this mess, all based on how the issue was handled way back since 2018. Taxpayers would literally be left on the hook for forced mandates, fines, and totally uninsured legal fees. Now, I want to pivot to a major investigative omission that's really worth your attention. If the state actually were to force a regional connection, there's a highly viable option that the official engineering report entirely ignored: the Muskegon County Wastewater Management System. It is essentially a 9-mile straight shot west along Bailey Road. And get this, Muskegon County engineers have confirmed they have substantial available capacity, they are highly receptive to taking the flow, and a similar 20-mile pipeline from Coopersville already proves it's technically feasible. Yet somehow, this option was completely left out of the PER. Which brings us to a really provocative question. Let's say the state forces a mandate and requires this 9-mile regional pipeline down Bailey Road. It's going to be astronomically expensive, right? But extending a sewer line out west would also massively increase development potential and property values all along that specific route. Now, this doesn't automatically prove improper conduct, but it undeniably creates some serious tension between public costs and private benefits. Taxpayers absolutely have the right to ask, if we are being forced to foot the bill for this pipeline, who is privately benefiting from the massive new development it's going to create? So when you lay it all out, the ultimate choice sitting right in front of Casnovia Township is incredibly clear. On one hand, they can support their licensed operator, correct those lingering operational problems, build out the already permitted reserve fields, and fully recover the site. Doing this preserves their $1.5 million asset and keeps local utilities under local control. On the other hand, they can do nothing. They can leave the system totally vulnerable and ultimately surrender both their infrastructure and their financial future to state mandates, all at the taxpayer's expense. Let's wrap up this explainer with what you can do right now. If you're a Casnovia Township taxpayer, it is absolutely crucial that you ask your local board these questions. Why were state violation notices ignored for so many years? Why was the totally valid 2012 EGLE data ignored to push for a new $150,000 investigation? Will the board finally enforce the 2011 sewer ordinance to stop all this excess flow? And most importantly, will you act right now to build the reserve fields and preserve local control? The evidence clearly shows a practical, affordable recovery is entirely possible today. But it leaves us with one final urgent thought. If a local government refuses to take the common sense steps to protect its own community's assets, who ultimately pays the price?